Let's finish our mid-vertebrae rig. So our next step is to skin our morph shape, and we can use helpers for this. Let's head over to our Create panel. We'll create a point helper. Let's have the display set to box and cross and the size to 20, so we should be good to go. We'll create the helper. Exiting the tool, we'll now go ahead and rename this to PT-ENV, followed by the name of our spline, which is MSHP vertebrae. And since this is going to lie at the root of our spline, I'll give it a suffix of root 01. Let's now enable our snap tool. We'll right-click and have this set to vertex snap, and we'll move that over to our start point. With it still selected, I'll go ahead and have this added to objects to hide. We'll clone this object as a copy, and we'll give this a suffix of N01. And now we can go ahead and just snap that over to the end of our spline. Let's go ahead and clone one more time for the center. And the center object is what will be wired into our animation control. So we'll give this a suffix of mid01, choose OK. And let's go ahead and move this over. Might want to turn off snap. So at this point, we can have this evenly centered between the two helpers using a position constraint. So with that selected, I'll Alt-right click and grab the position constraint tool, and we'll select the root. Now we can scroll down under our position list, choose Add Position Target, and add the End Helper. And now this is perfectly centered. We can right-click to exit target mode. Okay, beautiful. All right, so now let's go ahead and freeze transforms on these, and this is primarily to clean up the position constraint on the mid helper. We don't want that connection there any longer because, again, we want this connected into our animation control. So it's just to center this object. We also want to freeze this because we don't want this object to be offset at all when we wire it into the animation control. So we're just making sure that both transforms are set to 0 to connect with no offset. All right, great. So at this point, we are now ready to skin to our spline. Let's head over to our Modify panel. Let's make sure we are out of the sub-object level of the spline. So we'll simply just click on the editable spline. And now we can go ahead and add our skin modifier. There it is. From there, we will go ahead and add in our helpers. There they are, end, mid, and root. And let's go ahead and test the weighting. So we'll go ahead and grab our mid helper. All right, beautiful. We don't have too much to worry about as far as weighting goes. And it's just a matter of evenly distributing our weights across each helper. And we only need to worry about the center points, because the end points, you can see they are already anchored down. And that's what we want. All right, so I'm now going to go ahead and select our spline, and we can now enter edit envelope mode. Let's scroll to the top and enable vertex selection. And now we can go through and select all of the points in the center, all of the ones that need to be reweighted to our center helper. Okay, great. So at this point, I'll now Alt-right click and grab the weight table. Let's have the display set to selected vertices. And now here's how we'll weight this. We know that the start point, or the one closest to the start point, vertex 4, we know that it should be mostly weighted to our root helper, but it should have some influence from the mid helper. So I'll go ahead and have the mid helper value set to about 0.2. All right, now when we get to the next point, we can have some of its weight coming from the end helper, just a little bit, but it should have more weight from the mid helper. So I'll go ahead and set the end vertebrae weight to 0.2 here. So that will give that point 80% coming from the mid helper. All right, the next two we want fully weighted to the mid helper, so we'll go ahead and skip over those. And now it's just a matter of reversing the order here. So we can have the root set to 20%, since this point should be weighted to the mid helper mostly. And now when we get to this last point, we can have the weight of the end helper set to about 80%. So I'll go ahead and set the point at 20% coming from our mid helper. So I'll now go ahead and close this out and we can test this. Exiting edit envelope mode will grab the helper and start to kind of move that around. And notice we get some really nice curvature. I'd also recommend that if you are just kind of testing your weights, you could always turn on auto key, move over to, let's say, frame 20, lift the helper up, and then start to weight your points until you get better curvature if you find that you need better weighting. And then at that point, you can then go back to your start frame where this is set back to its 0 position. Alt right click and choose delete selected animation. All right, so guess what? We're now ready to wire this helper into our animation control. So what I like to do is go ahead and just double check to make sure again that we have frozen the object. We can choose transform to 0 to make sure it is not going to shift, just to be on the safe side. And now we'll grab the animation control. We'll choose Control 5. And then we can go ahead and choose transform, position, 0 position X, and we'll want that plugged into our helper's X axis. So grabbing the helper, that's going to be transform, position, 0 position X. And now we just need to wire into the correct parameters. So here's our control, here's the helper, so that's X to X, connect, Y to Y, connect, and Z to Z. Okay, let's go ahead and test this out. If we were to grab the animation control and move in the Z axis. All right, so things are kind of moving in reverse here. Let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so if we were to take a look at our orientation on this object, which we can do by switching the coordinate system to parent, you can see that things are actually kind of flipped on our mid control. Okay, well that's really nothing to worry about here. All we'll need to do is just go ahead and kind of wire in the controls a little bit differently. And I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. Let's go ahead and head back over to our wire parameter dialog. We can access it under the animation menu, wire parameters, and there it is. You can see the hotkey Alt 5. All right, so to load these back in again, it's just a matter of grabbing the objects we connected. So I'll grab the animation control and load that into the left side and just choose reload. And now we can go ahead and grab our helper and choose reload to load that on our right side. So notice the connections are right there. And now it's just a matter of figuring out how to wire these together. So you can see the Z-axis is pointed out and away. Let's go ahead and take a look at the helper. You can see the X-axis is pointed in reverse. So we know that in this case, we'd want the Z mapped to the X. So I'll grab the Z here, grab the X here. We'll go ahead and rewire this using the last arrow. And then what I'll do is add a little bit of math. Very simple. Since these two are pointed in opposite directions, we just need to use a -1. That's what we'd want to multiply by. So that's going to be Z position times -1, and we choose connect. All right, so that's 1 down. We can grab our animation control and notice it's going to start to move properly, almost there. Now we need to worry about our up axis, the Y axis. So we can see that Z is pointed up on our helper, great. We could also see that the Y axis is pointed up on our animation control. So I'll grab the Y axis and wire that into the helper's Z axis. And we'll just choose connect. So now when we grab the Y axis of our control, all right, things are almost there. We now need to worry about the last axis, which is the X. So you can see X is pointed behind the horse, and here Y is pointed forward. So we just need to use simple math again to reverse the order. So I'll go ahead and grab the X axis and plug that into the Y axis. And then we'll want to multiply by -1. and choose connect. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out. When we move this up, beautiful. When we move this over to the side, beautiful. And let's check the x-axis, great. All right, so with simple math, we've managed to rewire these, no worries. So if you find that that happens, it's very simple to fix. Beautiful. So guess what? We have finished our mid-vertebrae rig. Let's go ahead and take a look at our layers. You can see that everything is hidden the way it should be, making our scene a lot cleaner. So that will finish our lesson off, and in the next lesson we're ready to start finalizing the spline by working on our twist rig.